Alright, I'm out here in the field with the Evo 2. This is the 8K version, but again, the aircraft is the same, so I'm going to do an example waypoint mission. So I've created 3 waypoints, which you can see here on the screen. So the H in the middle, that is where we're currently at. First stop is going to be over here, second stop over here, third stop right there. These are all different buildings that are in the area. So for example, the first building is this one right here. Second one is right past straight ahead there. And the third one is going to be the McDonald's, which is over in that direction. And so at each waypoint, I've created an initial stop, which is the first one here, which you see the S. And then on this one, the number 2 would be more or less over the same building, but I'm commanding the drone to descend. So it's sort of a 2-step process. These 2 waypoints, as far as GPS coordinate, could be much closer. I just separated them to make it easier to edit and so on. But with the example here being that you would fly this drone to 3 different locations, descend down at each location and pause, and then go back up and then head over to the next waypoint. Waypoint number 1, it's going to hover for 10 seconds. Waypoint number 2 for 15. Waypoint number 3, it'll be there for 20 seconds. After it completes that, it'll return to home and land. At this point, the drone's ready to go, so we'll hit the fly button right here. And it's going to double check to make sure that everything is ready to go. Here's a critical thing. You see the loss of action. Continue mission. So that means if the remote were to get disconnected, this will continue on the mission. While it's flying, I'm going to turn off the remote controller just to prove that that does indeed work. But since everything's good to go, let's go ahead and give it the OK command by hitting fly. From this point on, it is completely on its own. Gonna ascend to 300 feet anywhere that it is cruising. Cruising altitude I've set to 300 feet, but I could adjust that any way that I wanted. When it reaches the buildings, I've set that descend level to about 150 feet. And so once it reaches that altitude, that's when it's going to decide to pause and wait as we've instructed it to do so. Okay, so at this point it's reached its first coordinate point, and now it's going to move over just a few feet but more importantly come down as it's doing right now. Again, I've only told it to go horizontally a little bit, just simply because it was easier to have those waypoints separated a little bit on the map. Just made it easier to click between the 2 to set it up. But nonetheless, it's essentially in the same area, over the same building, but now it's doing the pause for roughly 10 seconds. Off to the next waypoint. It does have a bit of a arc. In other words, it's going up as it's going forward. So I would plan altitude and distance accordingly there, knowing that it's going to kind of shoot off doing both at the same time. Okay. You'll notice when it gets to the initial coordinate, before it decides to do what it does orientate itself in the heading, which you can specify. In this case, I didn't. So what it does, it aligns itself to what essentially is the next step. So now it's going to wait for 15 seconds above this building, 150 feet over that building. You'll notice it is quite windy out today too. Maybe you can hear it in the microphone, but it's having no effect on the accuracy of this mission. It's spot on. Okay, anytime now it's going to break to the next. There it goes. cruising at 300 feet or so that I set it to. Could be lower than that, but figured 300 feet cruising, 150 for the time that it sits still. Kind of made like a good example. Okay, so now it's gonna start descending down to its final waypoint, where it'll sit here for 20 seconds. Now while it's doing this, moving on to the remote control here, you can see we're powered up and connected. I'm gonna turn this off. I'll leave it off. And the screen is completely off here. It does say that the remote control's been disconnected, and that'll have no effect on it completing the rest of the mission here. Of course, if it did something I didn't want it to do, I'd have to reconnect quickly and pause the mission, but I highly doubt that's gonna be an issue. So it completed its 20-second stand there, and next command is to return to home. So it's going to go ahead and do that. And there it goes. And with any luck, it'll land more or less where it took off from. Putting a lot of trust in the system right now since it's disconnected from the remote control, but I've noticed with the Evo 2 that it's very accurate on landing. It tends to take a lot of the visual data into account in addition to the GPS data. You can see there I made a minor correction. So it is pretty darn good at landing very close to where it took off from. And in this case, I don't really have a good reference. I'm not taking off on a landing pad or anything like that. So if it does come close, that's saying quite a bit. And I think I took off with this piece of garbage right behind it, and it pretty much landed in exactly the same spot. So there you have it.